All right, Hani, thanks for that. Hani Mahmoud with that update there from Khan Yunis.
Yes, hello and
Gaza.
good morning, those of you watching
Well, since
us
Israel's
on the
bombardment
backup channel
started 22 days ago, hundreds of buildings in
YouTube.
Gaza have been destroyed.
We're going to be
Homes,
showing on
schools,
YouTube. We may be
hospitals, they've all
following
been
this for
hit.
quite a while.
Rescue teams have spent days
let's hear
desperately
what they're
combing
saying.
through the
Look,
rubble, trying to save
This is
survivors
what
and
Israel is
recovering bodies.
propagating. And let us not
Hundreds,
kid
including many
ourselves.
children, are believed to be
Israel
trapped
is not
under
doing this on
buildings
their own.
right
They've
across
got the
the
tacit
Strip.
support of the UK.
The World Health Organization
the
says
US,
it is unable to
and of
reach
course
its
France.
staff and health facilities
They are
in
all
Gaza.
talking about, oh,
In a
this and
statement,
that.
its chief says
It's nonsense.
evacuation of patients is not possible under such circumstances.
Right. You see, all of that stuff, they're putting, what they're doing, you see the face they're putting on there is an African face. But Africa is powerless. The face of the man there is an African. And Africa is powerless in the UN. We have no veto powers. We have no business being in the UN as Africans. This war has shown us clearly that the intention of the veto powers, those who created the the UN, they have no intention of having a proper group of people coming together and actually looking at fairness, real fairness and justice. What they are interested in is maintaining power to continue the exploitation of places like Africa, particularly Africa. Africa being the most resource endowed continent in the entire world. And what they are doing in doing what they're doing here, putting the face of this man here, oh, the UN is doing something, and they're trying to reflect back to us so that they think, oh, they've tried. No, the real issue is the veto powers. The veto powers of the US, the UK, and France is allowing, they are supporting not only the veto powers, they send weapons to Israel to carry out this genocide. Because what is going on right now is genocide. What is going on right now is sheer, utter genocide. Let us call it what it is. And we live in an unjust world. And it behoves on those of us who want a better future for Africa to realize that what they're propagating there, they've been doing, as we speak right now, the UN are allowing the UN, under the flag of the UN forces, Congo is being raped and pillaged by UN forces who are there in those armor tanks of the UN. They are picking and looting African resources. They put them in the UN vehicles and take it out of the country. The landing strips where France, US, and others, there's a long line of vehicles going into Congo, taking resources from Congo on a daily basis. I keep saying it, Africans, we need to develop one Africa policy, one Africa, one continent, one currency. We need to do that. But this is obviously what you're seeing here is giving us. We have to be more. This has to. It needs urgency for us to understand that we need to pull out of that body. That body is ineffective. The fact that they put the face of a black man there. Oh, UN is this. They are heads of that. This man has no control. They has no control. The veto powers are that's where the controls are. And we have to understand the game that's being played here. So let's go on and listen again. This is courtesy of Al Jazeera, but I'll be interjecting in between. And we need to speak truth to power.
Nor to find safe shelter. The blackout is also making it impossible for ambulances to reach the injured. We are still out of touch with our staff and health facilities. I'm worried about their safety.
You see?
So it's going to be continuing. It was mentioned earlier today that they will continue to have those war cabinet meetings to decide where they move on next. And it doesn't look like, from what they're saying, that they are going to be retracting anytime soon.
And so how is the reaction in Israel itself to what's going on now?
We are speaking truth to power on what is going on. We are not lying. This is what we're doing is not.
Well, just as we speak now, it seems there have been Hamas rockets that have been fired. It's been happening since this morning, and possibly in response to the massive Israeli bombardment on Gaza overnight. Hamas has, in the last few days, sent those rockets heading over to Israel that have hit southern towns on that border, which are mostly evacuated. Some parts that are in central Israel, such as Tel Aviv. Yesterday, yesterday
There's
there was
very
a
minimal
few
damage. But look in
minor
Gaza,
injuries.
that small place,
And
2
today,
million
once
plus
again,
people.
they've obviously
This
said
is
on
genocide.
the northern
Let's call
border,
it what it is.
there were missiles that were sent over, and then again from the southern border. So
this is genocide.
Hamas seems giving up on that and will continue, it seems, to send those rockets. But more importantly, we've been hearing from the families of those that have been taken captive in Gaza.
So you
they're
may
very angry,
not be
they're very
this,
scared,
but,
incredibly scared. In fact, we spoke to one mum that said that last night was a night of hell, she told us, saying that, of course, the biggest concern for them is that their own
this is being shared on
family members will be killed in that massive and heavy bombardment from Israel. In terms of locations, it's still difficult to know where they are. And Hamas has said a couple of days ago that 50 of those captives were killed in that heavy bombardment. So they've been demanding to meet the Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Defense. It seems there are reports at the moment in Israeli media that that is potentially going to happen on Sunday. They had said to the family members that they would be protesting if they don't get to meet any of those
anyway,
officials for answers as to what the next...
Look, all I will say to you all as we're looking at this is a genocide going on, and it is being supported. The veto powers of the US means that they are not allowing Israel to be sanctioned. They're not allowing for Israel to be sanctioned. I'm going to show you something as I speak to you now, because I think the time has come for us to no longer be silent on this. And we need to speak up. And I'm speaking every time I'm saying this now, I'm speaking from an African perspective. The actions taken by the US using the vetoes is evidence for us that we want nothing as Africans. We need to stand on our own, because our interests are going to be they will make sure that they will never allow us to actually protect our interests, because they are going to be leaving us open to continued exploitation the longer we stay in the UN. We need to pull out en masse. I am calling on all African countries to pull out en masse from the UN. Don't forget, you have power. You may not know this, but you have power. Look at what has happened in Niger. Niger now, they are now selling their uranium at the world market price of 200 euros per kilogram, because they were able to pull away and stop the nonsense of the French, who have no business in Africa, from imposing on them to sell their own resources at 80 cents per kilo. That's what we need to do. We must pull out of the UN, because the UN body is a body set up to exploit African countries and others. And it is time we speak up. What is happening here? You can see the clear demonstration of the powers, the veto powers, being used to oppress and suppress people. And the sanctions that, if it was another country that was carrying out what Israel was doing now, that country would already be sanctioned. Their bank account will be frozen. There'll be massive military, sending in military planes to go and stop this genocide. But because the US is using the power to allow Israel to do this, this is injustice. We need to call it what it is. So let's listen on. I'll be interjecting as I go along.
Next step is, so potentially this evening we may see a protest by those families later today.
All right, Sarah, thanks for that. Sarah Harriott, then, occupied East Jerusalem.
All right, let's go on.
Still ahead here on Al Jazeera. Fire reports from UNHQ in New York.
The U.S. ambassador addressing the United Nations General at exactly the same moment Israel began some of its most intense...
Can you see what they're doing? The U.S. is using a blackface, a woman who has no control, no power. They are trying to portray that they've got support from we the people. How can you have support when over 100 and something plus countries are saying they should have a ceasefire? And they use the veto powers, and they put this woman in a situation whereby what is being projected, they support. They're trying to say that we support what is going on. This is mirroring. We should be outraged by this. If this lady was strong enough, she should resign her position and not be allowed to use in this manner. Let's go forward. Let's go forward. I'll hear what he has to say. But keep in mind, she's just a puppet. Sadly, that's the reality of what you're looking at.
Bombardments of Gaza. It's unclear if Israel timed that and the subsequent blackout of Gaza to coincide with the UN meeting. At that meeting, an amendment sponsored by Canada and the U.S. that would have and he said Israel should be held accountable because the world has spoken.
The General Assembly prevailed and sent the appropriate message, not only to the Palestinian people, that there is justice and fairness and international humanitarian law upholded by the General Assembly, but also it sent the message to everyone, enough is enough. This war has to stop. The carnage against our people has to stop.
3 weeks into the conflict, and finally the UN has spoken. A clear signal the majority of the world wants the bombardment of Gaza to end. Gabriel Elizondo, Al Jazeera at the United Nations.
Now then, the Turkish president has condemned Friday night's bombardment. Writing on the social media platform known as X, Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the ever-increasing Israeli bombardments on Gaza have again targeted women, children and innocent civilians, deepening the humanitarian crisis. Erdogan says Israel must immediately get out of this state of madness and stop its attacks. And he called for a large rally at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul to declare solidarity with Palestinians.
Rightly so. Rightly so.
At that rally and joins us now live. So, Osama, President Erdogan pretty forthright in his comments.
Well, you've seen his stance getting harder and harder in the last few days as President Erdogan has called Hamas Mujahideen, freedom fighters, calling on Israel to stop its madness, and here calling for this rally just a day ahead of the centenary celebrations here
they won't talk
Turkey.
about that in the US.
Thousands of people have already gathered here, and it's expected, the organizers have told us, that about 1 million people will gather here. There is a response to a growing anger on the streets that we've been seeing in the last few weeks. Turks have been coming out in their numbers every Friday and during the week as well. Just last night, thousands of them came out in sporadic rallies across the country, not just here in Istanbul, and showing their solidarity with the Palestinians, chanting slogans against Israel. And one of the organizers spoke to us last night from Erdogan's ruling coalition, told us that this is not the time to call for rallies anymore. According to people on the street and even in Erdogan's ruling coalition, that the governments of Muslim-majority countries need to act. They must show
we need to have an alternative body now.
Israel only understands power, and that's what they need to show. So this is going to be another show of force, responding to the cries and urging of the people to come out and do something to stop the attacks on Palestine.
And as I say, how important are Erdogan's words as that rally goes on as far as Israel is concerned? Do they add any pressure?
Well, it is unclear that this is going to have any impact on Israel or the attacks that have been carried out by Israel on the people of Gaza, but it does go to show what Muslim-majority countries are seething with anger, and that's why governments from Oman to Oman, from Cairo to Istanbul are responding to what their people are calling for, an end to violence and do whatever they can to stop attacks on civilians. And this has been the case. We were in Jordan a couple of days ago where we saw people angry in the streets trying to get to the Israeli consulate there. People tried to get to the Israeli consulate and protested outside the Israeli consulate here in Istanbul as well. And people have been saying that this is they've lost all faith in the international community. They accuse the West of being complicit in the crimes that are being carried out on Palestinians, and they say that the world has shown double standards when it comes to the sanctity of life for Palestinians. People have been drawing comparisons just a year ago of what was happening in Ukraine, how the world stood united against the aggression against Ukrainians, but now they say there is complete silence. Even in the United Nations, Western powers stand united with Israel as it continues its attacks. And this is growing in the last few days, as you've seen, in various capitals across the Muslim-majority countries, that people are demanding their governments to do more. They're angry at the international community, angry at their own governments, and angry at Israel for killing Palestinians.
Osama, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much, Osama bin Javed, there at a rally in support of Palestinians in Istanbul. Thank you. Well, the Israeli army says it has intercepted a surface-to-air missile fired from Lebanon. It says it was aimed at one of its military drones near Upper Galilee. An Israeli drone strike then targeted the launch site in Lebanon. Tensions have been rising at the border between the two countries for 3 weeks. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes by rocket fire and by skirmishes between Israeli forces and the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah.
On the screen
Let's speak now to Ali Hashim, who joins us live from Nakora in southern Lebanon. And Ali, I think we can see some pictures now of smoke billowing up from an area of what looks like forest. Can you describe what that's from and what's happening?
Well, since this morning, there have been several shellings from the Israeli side and also an attempt to attack from Hezbollah's fighter side with the launching guided missiles on the Israeli positions in our background. I think.
Let me pause and do this because I want you to understand what has been done here. Many of us are not aware. What you see on the screen there that I'm putting there is the Balfour Treaty. And people may not know this. I'm putting that there, and I might leave it on and off as I speak. But I'm going to quickly do something here. I want to do something to make this really, really clear. 1 second, please. Just give me a minute. I'm just going to get that up for you because we need to talk about this from a clear perspective. And what we say is they keep saying forget it. But you cannot forget this is injustice. This is sheer injustice. And we cannot be silent in the face of such. We shouldn't be, And like I said, this is evidence of why we as Africans must ensure that we create our own body because the UN powers, the veto powers you can see the effect of the veto powers. Beg your pardon, let me just quickly change that. Today being the 28th, of course, sorry about that. So I'm going to just quickly change this. Sometimes when you're doing the work that you're doing, you do, 1 minute please. Just want to quickly change that so you can see it as it is. Today is the 28th of October, a Saturday. So we're changing that. Now, let's quickly make this one. I want to make sure that you can see this, and I will read its entirety to you. Then we'll let the program roll again. But I want us to really understand, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to be fooled or tricked or any of those things anymore. We're living in an age where nobody can pull the wool over anybody else's eyes anymore. And I think we need to speak up for what is fair and what is right. That is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing here, principally, because we have to make sure. And I'm preparing the ground for justification for all 54 African countries to pull out of the UN. They can do whatever they want to do. But we need to have an alternative body where African lives will matter all over the planet. They're using African lives. The lady that's speaking on behalf of the US there, they know full well that it's a US. It's a front and a cover from what they've done, the genocide that allowed to go on. Now let us read this. I'm going to read it with you. This is the Balfour Declaration of 1917. Now, I need to say that because a lot of people don't know this history and they often like to hide it. They like to say, oh, it happened out of thin air. And we need to know these facts. That's what you see on the screen there. So when we do when I get back to the normal broadcast, you will see that I'm leaving it there for a purpose to remind us where the genesis of where all of this began. Now, let us do this. So I'm going to do this for a bit. So this is the Balfour Declaration, Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. Foreign Office. Straight away, that tells you. Just looking at the framing of the document again, Foreign Office. So this is nothing to do with the UK, but the UK, via its Foreign Office, but has actually made a change to the lives of the people who knew nothing. They played no part in their lives being torn apart. They were not given the opportunity to speak up for themselves. They were denied that opportunity. Very much like the Berlin Conference of 1884-85 that has blighted, that has destroyed the lives of Africans. They denied the Palestinian people the voice to speak up for themselves. Instead, the people that came to rip apart Palestine were given the power and support by the UK Parliament. That's the reality of the document that you see on the screen. Don't let anybody paint you a different picture. That's the reality. What is wrong is wrong. This is a Citizen Aware Backup channel, the platform where we speak truth to power. Now, let's proceed. I'm going to read it to you. Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. Just that alone, it tells you that they were doing this in the Foreign Office in UK. If they were going to talk about anything, it should have been discussed with the Palestinians. There should have been a discussion or debate on the Palestine soil. So the premise of them actually putting this document together is actually flawed from day one. From day one. Now, again, and the similarity with the Berlin Conference of 1884-85, because yet again they carved up a nation in the absence of the people, the representatives of the people who this was going to heavily impact. That's the similarity. That's why I'm saying we need to pull out of the UN. Now let's go forward. I want to show you this. So it says here, Dear Lord Rothschild, you see, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, at the time King, I don't know what his name, King, I don't know, I can't even remember the name of the king, but it doesn't matter more, they're all the same anyway. His Majesty's government, the following, declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. Keep in mind, the cabinet is in UK. And what land is this impacting upon? Palestinians. No part of this document speaks for the Palestinians, nor the voice or the representation. There is no representation for the Palestinian people in this document. Only for the Zionists, which was, yeah, they call themselves that, for the Jewish Zionists. There is no representation for Palestine. So the basis upon which this document was put in place is flawed from day one. But let's read on. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Where are the Palestinian representatives in this discussion? They are nowhere. That is the reality of it. And will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objective. Best endeavors mean, war, impoverishment, you name it, right? This object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Nothing shall be done. The fact that you have not allowed them to have a voice in this discussion on that date that was presented at the parliament shows injustice right there. But nobody wants to speak about this. Nobody wants to speak about it. And we need to speak up about it. Because, again, I'm showing this. The reason I'm doing this is not in support for Palestine. I mean, it's there for them to look at. And it's an injustice. But I'm telling you the basis upon which all 54 African countries must pull out of the UN ASAP and join and create a body that will protect Africa from the constant exploitation of the veto powers of the UK, US, and France in Africa. That's the reality. Now, let's go forward. So it says here, best endeavor, I'm going to read that again. So His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, with no regard for the Palestinian people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate. Who did the Palestinian people ask you to do this? Where's their voice in this? They've been silenced from day one. Right, okay. To facilitate this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So you are putting, I mean, this is a double speak. Those words are empty. The reality is the people that should have been a representative of Palestine mentioned in that document, and his views must have been reflected. But no, you are speaking for them. You have no right to speak for the Palestinian people. And that is the reality of it. Now, so let's go. Or the rights of and policies of statutes enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I mean, the Palestinian people have been silenced in this. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Where's the discussion? Where about the Palestinian people? Their voice was not in this document. That's the point I'm trying to make. Signed, whatever, whoever signed it. Lord Balfour. Balfour. That's the Balfour. It's Balfour. That's the name there. And that is the foundation of what is happening now. We need to know the foundation. That's why I wanted to bring that in. So let's pull away from that and bring this back to where it should be. So let me just, I just wanted you needed to see that, because sometimes not having that context, people don't understand what has been done. And so they'll just say, oh, it's been like, it hasn't been. 1917, remember that date. And it's in the document that you see on the screen there. So let's go forward again. I'll do this for a time, and I may come back. I just think it's something to talk about. I'm still going to come and talk about, our usual issue on the normal platform, but I'm using this platform to actually talk about this issue. Of course, in a fair manner. Nobody's supporting any terrorism. No. But what is going on is the US is actually supporting the terrorism and destruction of Palestinian land. That is a fact. They are supporting genocide. Now, let's go forward now and hear what they're saying here.
Background, I think our colleague Riot could show us. So we have several Israeli positions in this background on the hill. This is the border hill between Lebanon and Israel. You have Hanita military post, you have Shemrut military post.
Injured, forcibly displaced and collectively punished. Innocent victims.
Collective punishment.
Victoria Gatenby for Inside Story.
And they will mention the same thing that was done.
Let's bring in our guests to discuss all this. In Oman, it's Tanya Haj Hassan, a paediatric intensive care doctor who's worked in Gaza. She co-founded Gaza Medic Voices, a social media account that shares first-hand testimonies from healthcare workers in the Strip. In occupied East Jerusalem, we have Jason Lee, the country director of Save the Children in the occupied Palestinian territories. And in London, Yara Eid, a war journalist who spent her childhood in Gaza. Thank you all for spending your time with us. If I can start with you, Jason, just to get some context here about the population of Gaza. 2.3 million people, but about half are children, is that right?
2.3 million people, half are children. You see, there is an objective there, right there. Half of them are children. What they're trying to do is not about Hamas. This is about the total obliteration of the people. They don't want the population to grow. They don't. And they are getting support from the UN, the US, by the veto powers and the others. That's why I'm saying, for Africa to grow, we need to pull out of such bodies where the veto powers are being used to exploit Africa. It's about the veto powers, and we must address that. We need to create bodies. We have to create African body that will speak up for and defend the rights of Africans on African soil. We need our own world body. We need that.
Right?
Absolutely. You have the majority of people, the civilians living in Gaza now, being a child. Now, 1.4 million people have fled their homes. And that they will carry with them for the remainder of their lives.
Dr. Tanya, you've worked in Gaza, so we're talking about under this relentless Israeli bombardment, and 3 weeks in, we have 3,000 children killed. That means Israel in 3 weeks has killed about 1,000 children a week.
So Israel has killed 1,000 children a week. And they call and they say that, and they are killing more, and the US, we shouldn't have anything to do with the UN body. as African countries, we should pull out. We should pull away from this. We should set up our own bodies rapidly, because all of these bodies that there's been created is being used for pure exploitation, oppression and suppression and injustice, as demonstrated in what is going on in Gaza right now. We need to create an alternative body ASAP. Now, let's go forward. So, I mean,
this is the fifth Gaza war. We saw horrors from those previous wars. Did you think it could ever get to this?
I mean, I don't think anybody's mind should go there. It's families, parents who love them, siblings, identities, hopes, dreams, subjectivity, and inner world. And there's a risk of reducing them to numbers because we get habituated to hearing these numbers. But, you know, just like Israeli children have biographies, families, identities, hopes, and those have been shared with us, these over 3,000 children. And I just want to clarify, that number is the children that we're able to count in those statistics. 3,000 a week. There are over 900 children in the Gaza Strip that are missing right now, or missing from that figure right now, because their bodies have not been able to be retrieved from under the rubble. So we're talking at this point. And I completely agree with UNICEF. This is a growing stain on our collective conscience.
Yara, these clearly aren't numbers for you. You grew up in the Gaza Strip. These are friends and family members.
I've already lost 41 members of my family and 2 of my colleagues. And from the
first, can I please express my condolences? This is awful.
And from the 17 of them are children. And those children were really loved. You know, they were the light in our family.
This is the story you will not hear on the mainstream media.
Whenever I went back home, I would be the babysitter. You know, I had so many memories with them. Every single one of them had dreams. Every single one of them had a special character, and they all were very cheerful despite everything they've been living through. You know, children are the reason why I wanted to become a journalist in the first place. Because, you know, usually their voices are those that are not heard, and they're unable to articulate what they're living through. And as a kid myself, when I was a kid, I felt that, you know, I felt like the whole world doesn't care about me as a Palestinian kid. And I genuinely think that you know, Israel stole my childhood. Israel stole all of my memories from being a kid. You know, Israel stained my childhood. I was 14 years old when I saw people getting cut into pieces in front of my eyes. I was only 8 years old when I first experienced terror and you know, attacks on my school. I remember, I will never forget. I was doing my Arabic exam, Arabic final exam. I was in grade 3, and next to our school, there was a very severe bomb, and I remember my teachers just, you know, panicking and seeing all of the children crying. And this was the first aggression in Gaza. And right now we're in 2023, and we're seeing, you know, this is the 6th aggression since 2008. And Palestinians in Gaza, you know, the kids, if we're only gonna, you know, look at the kids, every single one of them, more than 90% of Palestinian children are you know, suffering from PTSD, me included, and my brother as well. And most of my relatives, for that matter, most of the kids in my family and our friends, you know, what we've been living through in Gaza, it did not just start on the 7th of October. This has been my whole life. You know, I grew up with the sound of bombs more than the sound of birds. I grew up, you know, being scared of the sound of airplanes. Till now, I'm in London, and there's airplanes a lot in London, and I'm still, you know, suffering from severe PTSD that even when the fire alarm goes off, any loud noise still triggers me. I've been trying to get treatment for my PTSD for the last 7 years, and I'm not even close to being, you know, treated from what I've seen and the horrific, you know, atrocities that's been committed against me and my people. And every single war, I almost got killed. You know, I just feel very lucky that I'm still alive, but every single Palestinian child in Gaza never felt that
this voice is not going to be allowed to speak
alive
on,
for the next moment or not.
Platforms like BBC or others.
We mentioned lots of figures at the start of this programme, and we know it's over 3,000 children killed. The figure may be much higher. It's worth bringing up the fact that there have been challenges to those figures. President Biden saying, I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling the truth about how many people are killed. He went on, I'm sure innocents have been killed. It's the price of waging a war. Can I ask you to weigh in on the figures? Because after he said that, the Ministry of Health produced this, which is a list of all those that died, a very detailed list with all of the names of those that have been killed and all of their details. From your perspective, from your organisation, Save the Children, what do you make of these official statistics that come from the Ministry of Public Health? Do you think they are accurate? Let's just be clear on that.
Yeah. So de facto authorities have been running the health system in Gaza for the last 16 years. And when you look through the previous escalations, which unfortunately there have been many, the figures that have been released by the Ministry of Public Health in, again, de facto authorities in Gaza, ministry officials, when you compare those to the official UN figures that are released, they're pretty much identical. There are slight variations, but again, these are very small in number, but they're pretty much accurate. So when we look through, again, historical evidence on what has the ministry been producing in previous escalations with what the UN numbers are, there is no discrepancy between them. So the figures that, again, are being used are the ones that until now have not shown to be discredited in any way, shape or form, and unfortunately, the previous countless escalations that have taken place in Gaza.
Yara, one of the most disturbing things I've heard in recent days, and there's so much disturbing information that we're all consuming, is the fact that families now are splitting their children up and putting them in different places so a whole family doesn't get wiped out, and also that parents are writing children's names on their arms so if they are killed they can identify them, and others are putting identity bracelets on their children. This is shocking.
You know, this is not the first time that this is happening. Unfortunately, it is the most brutal, most barbaric attack on Gaza, you know, ever. But you know, children are literally more than 70% of all the people who have been killed and casualties are children and women. So
look, what you see in that picture there, I'm going to be showing you this. There is Palestine before 1948. Yeah. Before 1948, after they did that shenanigan, that injustice in 1917, the Balfour Declaration, in 1948, that was Gaza. Let me get you a bigger picture. I'm just trying to show you, Palestine. I'm showing this because this is the grounds upon which Africa must pull out. I'm doing this from an African perspective. We must pull out of the UN because the body is being used to propagate what is nothing short of a genocide. So let me see if I can show you. Anyway, you will see. There you go. So I'm just trying to show you so you can see what's going on. You see, it says Palestine. See, and that is as of 1922. You see, 1922. I need you to understand. 1922. See that? See, that is that's Jerusalem there, and the name was. Sorry about that. The name Palestine. You see, in 1922. In 1922. So this has been what has been going on. This was Palestine then. Now let's look at. Oh, can I show? 1 second. I'm going to give you one more. I want you to look at what it is like now so you can get proper context. That's why I'm doing this. And again, for Africans to understand, we must pull out of the United Nations. They are puppets. What they do there, they will do far worse, even still, if we do not begin to take action to pull out. We must pull out of it. We need to create our own bodies. And we need one currency, one African policy, one continent with no colonial borders allowed on African continent. Zero. Now, see, look at that picture there. See, from this, the whole of Palestine, there's no such thing as Palestine. Now they put West Bank and Gaza. So, and this was all Palestine. So we know the figures. So I'm showing you this. I'm not trying to be, they don't want you to talk about that, but that's the reality. And what is being going on now is genocide. So anyway, I'm just giving you the context. Let's play on.
What's happening is a clear, violation of international law. But this has been my life. I remember in 2014, my mother is a UN staff member, an UNRWA staff member, and she had to be working continue for more than 20 days. It's not like, one massacre that has been committed in one day and we could have stopped it. No, Israel continues to massacre children. The figures are continuing to increase. We're seeing horrific accounts from journalists on the ground that are risking their own lives to produce these pictures, these graphic pictures of children, videos that not only break hearts, like I am literally unable to sleep since the aggression started. I barely sleep 3 hours a day because of those pictures that haunt me. And the world is just watching. Biden is there giving the green light to Israel to continue what they're doing, massacring children, and I'm shocked. I never thought, I genuinely thought, our world can't be this horrible, but every single Palestinian right now feels like this is not our world. I don't know.
Well, let me bring in Tanya on this. Because we've talked about the bombardment, but of course the other factor here is the aid not getting in, very limited aid, and the specific that they're not allowing in, the Israelis, is fuel. From your perspective as a doctor, how important is fuel for those hospitals, for keeping the hospitals running, for running things like ventilators and incubators for newborn babies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I just want to address a couple of things that were shared in the last few minutes by my co-speakers today. Just in reference to what Yara was saying earlier, and to put things in context for our viewers, a child of age 11 today would have lived through 4 major bombardments up until this point. And then in reference to something else that we were just discussing, there's this deep sense of being alone by Gazans and Palestinians in general that I've spoken to. So colleagues that I have in the field in Gaza who have sent messages saying, we feel like 2 days ago, one of my colleagues sent us a message to say, we feel like the whole world has come together to eliminate us and nobody's listening to us and the world is deaf to our suffering. And I think, first of all, I think that should be very alarming to the people listening to this program today. But I also think it's reflective of a particular type of psychological trauma, of feeling completely isolated and feeling like the world is voluntarily silent to your pain and suffering. One of my colleagues today said in Gaza, the whole world is watching us getting massacred on TV and just silently watching. And so just in reference to the number question that you provided to Jason from Save the Children, I think kind of discrediting the deaths is part of that dehumanization. So I just wanted to make that point, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and Tanya, on the specifics of not allowing fuel in as a doctor, how is that going to impact the medical situation on the ground?
So just for context, fuel operates everything from the ambulances that go to collect people from under the rubble, to go pick up pregnant women who are delivering, or others who are having heart attacks. We rely on our paramedic services in normal times. So you can imagine in times of crisis like this, how important having fuel for that is. Fuel is needed to bring the aid, the very little aid that is coming in to the locations it's needed to be delivered to. And then on a hospital level, fuel operates just about, or electricity actually, more accurately, operates just about everything in my subspecialty, which is critical care medicine, from ventilators to monitors to infusion pumps. And without those things, you cannot run an intensive care unit. And without those things, patients who are without electricity, and I want to make the distinction between fuel and electricity, because the electricity supply has been cut off of Gaza Strip, and fuel is really what's needed to operate the generators, which in pre-October 7th times are the backup system for the hospital's electricity. So it would be needed to put on a ventilator, which many patients in intensive care are, and you cannot operate the ventilator or suddenly you run out of fuel, those patients will die. It is a death sentence. They are unable to breathe, they suffocate, they die. The same is true for patients who are dependent on dialysis. If we cannot operate the dialysis machines, those patients unfortunately will die. The same is true for neonatal units where newborn babies are taken care of, and newborn babies are often in incubators, they're often on breathing machines. All of these things require electricity, and the second the generators can no longer provide that electricity because the fuel has run out. And so it's essentially a lack of fuel is an ultimate death sentence on multiple levels. And I've sort of talked about the hospital intensive care level of things, but there's also, bakeries have closed down because they don't have fuel to operate the bakeries, and bakeries are needed to provide fuel. Water desalination plants cannot function because, again, they need electricity to desalinate.
Let me bring in Jason now on this, because the other additional factor to all of this is that there are people on the move everywhere in Gaza, in part because Israel is threatening them, telling they have to move, but all safe, and clearly there is no safe place in Gaza. I looked at some of the UN statistics. They said about 1 million people displaced, include 4,750 pregnant women, 390 postnatal cases requiring medical attention, and the UN saying they're increasingly identifying acute respiratory and diarrhea among children under 5. Tell us about
this is genocide.
Not those in hospital, but those
that facts. Straight facts.
Under medical care. And
Straight
the ordeal they're facing.
We're witnessing genocide.
Absolutely. As I said, we estimate there's about 1.4 million people that have fled their homes. Now, they're sheltering wherever they can. In schools, UN facilities, public, 650,000. That's a huge amount of people trying to shelter in 150 shelters in the south that was not built for that capacity. Many of the shelters are hosting up to 4 times as many people as they were built for. That means there's no food, supplies of water, and bathroom facilities. In one center, there is 16 bathrooms for about 25,000 people. And there's no water, so you can't flush. There's no water to maintain hygiene practices. There's no water to drink. Again, I want to reiterate, fuel is critical to ensure that the desalination plants work, that the pumps are working to actually bring up the groundwater. Civilians and children are now resorting to drinking brackish water or saline water because there's not enough fresh water for them to drink. Now, even the journey to the south, I mean, many people are still remaining in the north because it has not been safe for them to move. Despite the evacuation orders to move to the south, the journey to the south was perilous. My own teams and their families had to flee from their homes in the north to take shelter in the south.
Okay, Tanya, we had a warning in recent hours, deals with Palestinians, the Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini, and he's now saying things could get even worse. He says there is a risk of serious disease and starvation.
It's like they want to just allow
that is certainly true. I think you have thousands of people sheltering, as Jason was saying, in environments that are meant for a very small fraction of that number, sharing the same lavatories and
this is injustice.
Drinking unhygienic water. We already know that there's been a spike in diarrheal disease illness amongst children in the Gaza Strip. We don't have reports of cholera yet, but an outbreak of cholera in these sort of dense settings would be catastrophic. And unfortunately, in these circumstances, chickenpox and other contagious diseases, as a consequence of people living in very close proximity, sheltering all together in these types of settings.
We're coming near the end of the programme, and I'd like to give the last word to Yara. Yara, given what we're hearing, this desperate stories about the plight of people in Gaza, and particularly children in Gaza, if you were able to speak to President Biden right now on behalf of the children in Gaza, what would you tell the President of the United States?
They're not going to listen, sadly. They're going to be tone deaf.
Well, I'll certainly start by saying that I'm shocked by your actions, you know, that you have blood in your hands. You are literally not only aiding genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, but most of them are children, and that those children will never forgive you. You know, these children are becoming, you know, orphans. They're either being killed, they're either, you know, but even if we think there is an immediate ceasefire, which you have as a president, you have such a responsibility as a world leader, and a leader, you know, not only a world leader, but also the president of one of the, you know, the strongest and most powerful countries in the world. You have a responsibility, you know, with all of your freedom of speech things, and you're all the rights and how you talk about democracy. As a democracy, you claim you're a democracy. How are you aiding a genocide of innocent Palestinian children? You know, even if you call for a Gaza, you know, even if there is a ceasefire, these children, their lives, you know, it's scarred forever. And I'm one of those children. I was once a child. I've lived through these things. I've lost so many people from my family. I left Gaza. It's not like this is a new situation, you know. All of these lives, all of these dreams, you're responsible for what Israel is doing, you know.
Yara, thank you so much for your time. This was a most depressing conversation, but thanks so much to our panel for joining us. Tanya Hassan, Jason Lee, Yara Eid. You'll find much more about the Gaza war, and you can watch this or any other of our programmes again if you go to aljazeera.com. Also, we want to know what you think. Post your comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can even tweet us, although now it's called X, not Twitter. We're at AJ Inside Story.
So, yeah, and of course, Citizen AY is on Twitter as well, so you can subscribe to us there. What we're doing is basically showing you the injustices of what's been happening. Let's just, I want to roll back to where, anyway, we'll see what they're saying in a minute. I'm probably going to pull away from there and get something else. What is going on is injustice, and that's the reality of what we're saying. What is going on is sheer injustice, and that is the real injustice of the situation that we're in. That a nation will support the so-called police of the world is supporting genocide, and that is really, really sad to have to even talk about from that point of view. Let me just check something whilst I'm doing this.
We'll be back in this chair very soon from all the team here. Stay.
So, anyway, we're going to pull away from that for a second. I want to leave you with that image again. I'm going to come back and talk about this. I want you to know, please. Look, we're going to do a walkthrough from the top. This was Gaza, Palestine in 1922. You see that? See there? Now, I'm going to do something. I'm actually going to show you the full picture because I want you to get a full understanding of what has been done here. We as Africans, we are justified. We don't need to wait anymore. The UN body is there to use and exploit, and they continue to use us. We shouldn't be. We should put a stop to this injustice of being exploited by the same body that's looting our resources, and we need to wake up. In Africa, arise. I say that all the time. Africa, arise. So let me get. So that is. You can see there. It says 1922 up here. Up here, it says 1922. Independent. You see. That's as of 1922. That's Palestine. You see, with Jerusalem as its capital. You see that? They took That was it. Palestine. Keep note of that picture. Now, let's go and look at this one. Now, look at this now. This is what they've done. Sorry. And that's the declaration, but now this is no longer Palestine. This is now, you see, there's no Palestine. It's West Bank and Gaza. And then they talk about, when they talk about two-state solution, it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. This is sheer injustice. And we must call it out as we see it. So that is my take on it. And this is the basis upon which all 54 African countries have to pull out of the UN. The UN is there to exploit and oppress. And we need to speak up. So I'll come back to him. So no, I am very, very clear about this. We need to really make sure we begin to hold our people and get ourselves out of this situation. Africa must arise. And that's the perspective from which I'm covering this. I hope this makes sense to you. Thank you so much for watching. You've been watching Citizen AY on Citizen AY, the backup channel. I'll be back later on to give further updates. But keep in mind what is going on here is sheer injustice. And as it is, this is the proof that we need to completely pull out of the UN. We must pull out of the UN. Thank you for watching. This is where Palestine is and all of that. So it's left for me to just say thank you for watching. You've been watching Citizen AY, the platform, Citizen AY backup channel, and the injustice of what's going on here is it's beyond words. This is what is going on right now, and we need to use it as the grounds upon which we are totally justified in actually breaking free and going for indeed going for having our own body and to have one African continent, one currency, one foreign policy, and you know, protect ourselves and a body that's going to be rivaling the UN because we've been denied our human rights by the very body that's supposed to, that's quote unquote talks about human rights. You can see the example of that, this horrible genocide that they've been perfecting, destruction, genocide, oppression, suppression, exploitation, colonialism. I could go on. So ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. About later on. Please do share this broadcast if it resonates with you. Africa must pull out of the UN en masse. This is what we've been witnessing is just sheer injustice. Thank you for watching. About later on. Please do subscribe to Citizen AY backup channel.